Welcome to DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. On this week's show, we're going to answer the question you've been burning to find out about. How can you properly add a subwoofer to your two-speaker sound system? I'm waiting for the applause. Where's the applause? Didn't we have a live studio audience?
And the crowd goes wild. Well, it was such
two of us. Where's the rest
such
of
a soft intro.
Where's the audience? I thought we had an audience. Where's that? Dang it. I forgot
it's the internet, John.
I forgot to invite him again. Yeah. We'll have to work on that.
Hey, audience, if you're out there, send a message. I won't see it because John doesn't let me see the chat.
Yeah, exactly. You get distracted. Oh, look, it's shiny things. Yeah,
I'm pretty ADHD. Yeah. If I saw the chat, we'd never have a show. But you know,
there was that one time. Now,
drop a nugget in there so John knows you're there. So
when we were in Atlantic City, and we're set up on the boardwalk, and Ben and I are going to do just a quick thing from Atlantic City, and on the edge of the screen there was the chat window. And if you happen to go back and you watch that video, you'll be seeing us talking, and then all of a sudden Ben's like, "Oh."
I love that. That's right. I did. I loved that. And I don't know why. I guess I don't even know how you're going to take this comment. Anybody who's watching, right? But I think my favorite part of that, was we did have a live audience there. We had some people who came down to watch it live, and we're just basically standing there on a beach, right? We don't have anything in front of us except for a camera.
Yep.
And one of the guys that was there, he says, I mean, I can't say exactly what he said. I don't think. I mean, because it's
been a few years.
Yeah. Children's years. But anyway, he basically says, "Holy crap, you actually know this stuff." He's like, "I thought you were just like reading Google or something." I'm like, "No." He's like, "You're standing there with nothing in front of you but a camera, and you and John are talking about this." He goes, "I just can't believe you actually really know this stuff." And I'm like, I'm like, what are you? I don't know. I guess
that was between the look shiny things. Oh, look shiny things. I mean, it was all happening at the same time on the beach.
I wasn't really sure how to take it though, because I think on one hand, it was still a compliment because he thought I might not be a very good tech, but I was just a really good actor.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe, maybe.
It turns out I'm a pretty crummy actor, but I'm pretty solid as a tech.
Yeah, there's everyone's got to have their thing in life. So.
Yes.
So for those of you who are going to be looking for Big Daddy's from the Marquee Show, Big Daddy is in Chicago with the Marquee Show. That's going on right now, but he's got himself so tied up as Big Daddy can only do with trying to walk down the hall with
fighting through the throngs of fans,
exactly.
Right?
So
as you can see, my Tuesday night is free. I don't have any fans, so
exactly. Here we are. So
you get me.
This shows you where we are at. So Big Daddy will be back. He's actually many little short snippets are going to be dropping here in the next few days because they've been shooting some video that Big Daddy's been talking to a lot of folks there. So you guys will get to see that, and then he'll be back later in the season. So let's dig into that with the subwoofer, Ben. There's things that. And it's for people who have been, I've been a DJ for 20 years and I've had tops and subs and such. This might not be the show for you tonight because really what I wanted to do is focus on the DJs who have gone out and they bought two top speakers. They've been running them full range for a long time, and they're getting to the point where they're like, I've saved up my money and I'm ready to take a step and increase the sound, and I've heard subwoofers is the direction to go. So let's take them from that point and kind of help them to understand what the process to do this and do this right would be.
Yeah, well, I think it is the step, and there's no substitute for a subwoofer. And we've done some other shows where we talked about different woofer designs for, there was the one subwoofer show where we talked about that. And, people might be saying, well, if I've got a 15-inch top, what's it going to add to get a subwoofer, even if it's a 15-inch subwoofer? What's the difference, right? Well, there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference in the design of the driver. There's a huge difference in the way that cabinet is voiced. And that's a whole other show. But I do agree. I think it is a great move because it really adds another layer to your music, and it also and to the experience of the audience. We can get into how people hear sound, Fletcher Munson curve, blah 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 blah, or you can just take my word for it. It's a pretty good move. But I think one of the things that another benefit is it also takes a lot of the pressure off of your tops. Your top can focus on doing its job, which is a really good segue to one of the very first things we have to talk about, which is how do we decide who does what job. So I threw a little PowerPoint together here.
Nice.
Let me spin this bad boy up here. And all right, I was a little lazy with my animations, sorry. So here we go.
Okay, let me just get this. There we are. So we are now full screen.
All right, so what we've got here is this is our full range signal over here, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That's from bass to high frequency. And let's just imagine that this represents bass over here and treble over here. And I'm gonna need a crossover of some kind. And we'll talk about where these things can be found and what speakers have them and don't, whatever. But basically my red line represents the crossover for my sub, and this blue line represents the crossover for my top. And what that's doing, as you can see on the right, is the top is only getting now, in this case, it's 100 hertz crossover. The top is only getting 100 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and the sub is, let's see, there we go. So there's our crossover point at 100 hertz. So the top is only getting 100 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So this driver here, this 15 or whatever it is, 12, no longer has to do anything below 100. And this subwoofer down here can focus on doing just what it does, which is the 20 to 100. And in reality, probably more like 35, but
Sure.
Anyway, give or take. So everybody has got, a more focused job to do. So not only are we getting more full range sound out of our speakers, we're also going to be able to go a little bit harder with them, So now,
Ben, can you bounce back there, please? Talk a little bit about now. You're crossing. The two are literally crossed over at 100. They're on top of each other, but there's kind of a tapering off there. Are we still getting sound? Specifically, let's look at the tops. Are we still getting a little bit coming frequencies below 100 hertz in that kind of a configuration?
Yeah, I'm going to switch to green ink here, e-ink or whatever it would be, because, what we can see is this roll off, right? And, there's different, we call them, roll offs basically, but there's different dBs per octave or whatever. Basically, how fast does it roll off?
Sure.
And in this case, we're looking at a fairly typical analog crossover. In the FIR world now, we could even have what we would call a brick wall crossover, which might look more like this, really goes down quick, and you'd say, well, yeah, there's this dip here. So what's happening at 100 hertz? Well, because these two are summing here, we're gaining this frequency, this back, because these two are going to sum and sort of fill in that gap. So if we look at the actual system performance, it's probably pretty flat.
Okay.
A good way to look at this would be, if you looked at some passive boxes that have crossover networks or whatever, and we've done some really good shows on DSP, and I think would be really good places for people to go look if you want to dive deep into crossovers. But the key takeaway here is that we want to make sure that only the sub frequencies are going to the sub, and only the top frequencies are going to the top. So we need this crossover right here.
Right there, yep.
All right.
And that crossover point it isn't always at 100. There's different times for it to be at different frequencies.
There is. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to mention that a little bit later on.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So now this happens to be an RCF, and I love RCF. I think they make some absolutely fantastic stuff. However, one thing this speaker does not have is a built-in crossover. So if you own tops like this, and I picked on this for a reason, to point out that we have to come up with this crossover somehow. It's not inherently built into this speaker.
Sure.
So what RCF does is they build it into their subs.
Okay.
So in this case, you can see we've got, whoops, sorry about that. In this case, you can see, maybe, come on, drawing tool, please, just cooperate. We've got here where it says you can choose, is this a link or is this a crossover?
Okay.
And in this case, and you can see where the preset is here, by choosing a number in this menu, you can see what that subwoofer's frequency is, and that would be our crossover point for the top.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can bring in full range signal in here and a crossed over frequency here.
Well, this is a great example. If somebody was adding this sub, and you've got two audio cables coming off your controller, how would you utilize those in feeding your top speakers?
I love that question, John. So in this case, you'll notice that they have given us both a left and a right. And the low frequencies typically are mono. They're typically center panned anyway, is a better way to say that maybe. So, I could take either channel and probably not be missing anything, but I think the best way to do this would be to bring both channels in and then both channels out. For one thing, if I only have one sub, I'm going to need that crossover for both sides anyway, because I need a crossed over signal here and a crossed over signal here. But this way I'm getting my left and right information into the sub, and I'm getting my left and right information out to the appropriate tops.
Sure.
Now there's of course an age-old debate. Do we run in stereo? Do we run in mono? This isn't that show, but to answer your question directly, I would run both channels. If you're only running one sub, I would bring both channels into this, and then I would run them out to the tops.
Nice.
And if you're running two subs, then that's different. Engineering being a series of compromises, maybe we have subs, tops over subs, so on and so forth. So, right, all right. So, what if you don't have a crossover in your system? And it's interesting. And again, I love RCF. We sell a lot of their stuff, and I install a lot of their stuff, and I think they make really fantastic stuff. So I'm not digging on them here, but they prefer this type of a system. They prefer using a signal processor that is going to do a number of different things. When we do installs, they'll recommend this for their line arrays, even though they have some DSP on the boxes and things. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of things that are built into this, besides just a crossover, EQ and delay and those sorts of things. But anyway, this device here is a DSP, a digital signal processor, and I'm going to flip to the back view here. And no, I'm not. Oh, yes, I am. So remember this slide? Yeah. Crossover? Yeah. All right. So we're going to go with these colors. That's why I put that slide in there. Here's the back of this, and I've put some colored dots over these XLRs. And if you happen to get your new Rain Performer from NLFX today, that's what it would look like.
Dun, dun, dun.
So there's my left and right going into the processor. And then now here's my left and right outs going to the tops. And by the way, different DSPs have different architecture. Sometimes it goes top sub, top sub. Right. Sometimes you can assign them. You can make them whatever you want. So this is just, for the sake of the example, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then here would be my subs. So I've got a full range signal coming in green. And then just like the colors in my crossover, I've got blue going to my tops and I've got red going to my subs. So this would be one way to do it if your speakers don't have that processing built in.
Now,
or if you're running a passive system.
Typically, would an external DSP like that have more functionality? Would it be a cleaner function? What's the benefit really of having an external as opposed to just using what's built into the speakers if it already has it?
Well, I think it depends on what the speaker has built in, and certainly different speakers have different things built in, and we can get into, in fact, we will get into our other friends at Evie, where depending on the different series, some of their boxes have EQ on board, some of them have delay on board. In that case, it'd be really hard to argue to get an external DSP. I'd say, I don't know. It's pretty much all built into the box. I mean, maybe the only advantage there would be putting that information at your fingertips, but probably really not any real compelling reason to do it. And engineering being a series of compromises, somebody might say, well, I'll just go with the one built into the RCF sub 2. It's not very you know, well-featured DSP, but you know what, it's going to work great and it doesn't matter, you know. And they wouldn't be wrong necessarily. This is going to have a lot more functionality built in though, like delay, like EQ, you know, those kinds of things. Loudspeaker presets sometimes. Depends on the DSP, and I'm trying really hard not to get too brand specific. I took a bunch of screenshots of different speakers, and I decided I'm not going to get into the weeds there because it really, I could see where it would overwhelm people pretty fast. So, we're just going to look at two brands. There's a lot of brands out there and a lot of different ways to do things. And basically, I'm acting under the belief that people already own their tops.
Right.
So it really doesn't matter. It's kind of my point. You know, what you got, if you already own your tops, then we're working from what you have, and it would just be impossible to have every example in here. So
Yeah, for sure.
I will say this, feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues if you've got some tops and you're looking to add a sub, and you can say, hey, I've got these tops. What do you think I should do? And we can help guide that process. But anyway, let's take a look. So here's another DSP. And this one this is from a top box. And the top says, hey, do you have a sub? And if you say no, then you leave it in the off setting. So it's really nice that this is kind of built in. And then there's a little, you know, kind of a very simplified EQ on this box as well. And there's some other features. Anyway, not going to get into all the features of this DSP. But you can also say, yes, I do have a sub, and I want to cross it over at 80 hertz, or I want to cross it over at 100 hertz, or I want to cross it over at 120 hertz. Or what's really cool is they also have models of their own brand of subwoofers. So if you own this brand's tops and this brand's subs, you just dial up the name and say, okay, you go to the sub and you go, well, I have this top, and you go to the top and you go, I have this sub, and everything's done for you. You know, it's done all the work. Just for fun, I decided to show a menu from one of their subs, and this is one of their entry-level speakers, and then I decided to show one of their higher-end speakers. So this is the menu on the sub, and we can see right away, we can actually just look at it, you know, it's right on the menu, and it says, oh, there we go. And you'll notice they used that same symbol that I did in the crossover. So that's showing me that at 100 hertz, everything is passing to the sub. So low pass or high cut would be two ways we could call that filter. And then on the top, there's an identical one, or mirrored one anyway, that is sending everything to the top. And that's not on this sub. This sub does not have a crossover for the top. It only has a crossover for itself. So this sub is not going to be the sub to use if you don't have one for your tops. But it is a great one to use if you have tops that do have that crossover. And when you get into the menu, you can see there's all kinds of, you know, various functions. We could change mode and, you know, location, cardioid or normal, whatever. And there's that low pass, 100 hertz. And again, we're calling it a pass filter because everything below that crossover point, that's really hard to draw with a mouse, can pass. So it's going to do that. And then, of course, you know, we've got our crossover to the top. So clear as mud.
Yeah. I think the crossover, the areas I think where people really struggle with that is knowing how to decide. Do I do the 80? Do I do the 100? Do I do the 120? As you showed those examples, it's that becomes clear as mud, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, you know, and here's our first it depends of the evening. But it does, you know, it's going to depend on what you want that sub to do and what that sub can do. And same with your tops, really. So, you know, on my rig, I'm crossed over at 80, which is really pretty low. I think if you had to pick a number and you weren't sure, I would just go with 100. You know, it's a nice round number with a bunch of zeros behind it, well, 2 anyway, you know, but it's kind of that Goldilocks, right? It's not, you know, not too low, it's not too high. I think 120 is too high, you know, but it really depends on what you have. I have some pretty ridiculous subwoofers, you know, and I also have some pretty ridiculous tops. So I don't want those subs trying to produce 100 or 120. I need them to focus on their job and, you know, produce, you know, 30 to 80 with, you know, bowel evacuating levels, you know, but then my tops have to be able to dig down to 80, at high enough SPL. And I read a great article the other day on loudspeaker engineering about, how we trade off all these things for power and excursion and all those things. And, it was really great because the article basically said a bunch of manufacturers are liars, and I think they are. As a friend of mine who actually works in loudspeaker design said, if lying on loudspeaker specs were a crime, there'd be a lot of people in jail, So, and there's ways to sort of tell half truths, So I think anyway, that I'm sort of getting into the weeds here, but the punchline is if you have to pick one, pick 100. If you're not really sure, feel free to reach out and we can kind of say, well, I'd maybe go here, I'd maybe go there. We can't always, if you've bought your sub and your top from somebody else, we can't always answer that question. And the reason is if you blow something up and then you say, well, I did it the way you said, it doesn't work like that, So.
And when you're talking about the loudspeaker, these specs on loudspeakers, because we've seen some top speakers or full range cabinets that say they go down to 35, 40, which in the real world probably isn't the case. Maybe they can reproduce a little bit at that frequency, but they can't do it at what you need. So is there like on your system, is your system featuring a 12-inch, kind of a 12-inch woofer with that system or is it doing more of a 15? Does that number correlate to give you a better idea of what's the best crossover point?
It can, but as we saw in our subwoofer show where we talked about different driver types, not all 12s are created equal. My tops do use 12s, but they are monsters, but that's why they're in a touring class line array.
Right.
And they can go at that level for that length of time without bursting into flames, and or just obliterating themselves into tiny little pieces, because there's a lot of forces that have to be reconciled there. But also, it's not just the driver, but the loudspeaker enclosure design and there's the processing that goes with it and all those kinds of things, right? So I don't want to just say, oh, if you have a 12, do it at this. I think if you have to pick a number, pick 100. It's a good starting point,
And there is some adjustment as you're listening to it and you've got things set. If you have the ability to change them, I mean, it might be by ear. You decide that, hey, I like this better than that, I would think.
Yeah, no doubt. And keep in mind what we're trading off here is how much work each speaker is doing. So, obviously we want to kind of find that sweet spot. We don't want our sub trying to produce frequencies too high. It's not going to be good at it. It's going to take it away from doing what it needs to do, what it's best at. But at the same time, we don't want our tops producing frequencies that are too low. So, again, and I think honestly, it's not like the world's going to end if you pick any of those three, 80, 100, or 120. But in most cases, for DJs, I think 100 is probably where we want to end up.
Nice. Yeah, we have somebody talking about when they connect their 12-inch sub, they've got a 12-inch sub and they wanted to use it with a 12-inch top. And they set the crossover point at 80, and they're wondering if that would, in that configuration, if that would be a wise spot to do it.
I think it depends on the tops. It's certainly taking some pressure off that subwoofer. It's allowing that sub to focus on a narrower band. I guess I'd kind of run the system and see how it sounds. And B, is one device running out of gas before the other? Is the top running out of gas before the sub, for example? In which case, maybe shift the load a little bit,
Yeah.
And that could be hard to, there was this article I read, where he talks about how different manufacturers put different limit lights on their speakers. And he's like, he talked about one brand where the speaker was clearly limiting and it was clearly no longer reproducing full frequency of sound. And he goes, and the light didn't come on until the thing was basically ready to catch on fire.
Oh, goodness.
So, a person who owns this box might say, well, this thing doesn't limit at all.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like horse crap, though. Like it's not doing its job. It's long ago quit producing the frequencies it was supposed to. And to be honest, I don't want to, hurt anybody's feelings, but I think a lot of DJs wouldn't notice, They go, oh, sounds fine to me. oh boy, not so much, and I think, and again, I'm not picking on anybody, but if there are musicians that are also DJs or people who have trained ears, they're going to go, oh yeah, no, it definitely, that's not, it doesn't sound the same once you get to this level.
Hmm.
So anyway, that was sort of a long-winded way of saying, the indicators on the box might not just be the only way to know, right? If you can tell, you're like, yeah, that top is really struggling. Maybe bump that up to 100 and see what happens. And then if the sub is struggling, I don't know, I mean, so engineering being a series of compromises, right? So,
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be that get it, test it, see what it sounds like, and then when you mentioned them running out of gas, which one runs out of gas first? I think that is such a critical area.
yeah, for sure. And and as a rule, I mean, I kind of like to have two or three subs per top. It's they tend to need more footprint,
Hmm.
to move more air. I know that's not always practical, and obviously, venues have certain load-in restrictions and times, and there's also noise restrictions, and maybe you know what we're trying to accomplish doesn't reconcile with that. So basically, what I'm saying is nothing I'm saying here is the gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, systems like the Evolve or the Evox or systems like that, which use 12-inch subs or 8-inch subs or 15-inch subs, do a great job.
Hmm.
So, for weddings and that sort of thing, I think they're perfect. The SPL levels are certainly adequate. But if you're doing schools or something and you're really trying to suck the air out of people's lungs, you're going to need some firepower. There's no replacement for displacement. You're going to
Hmm.
need something that moves air. Now, that's not the show we have today. If
Yep.
you have no subs at all, adding any subs is going to be a big deal. You're going to go, wow,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
It's a
You
step.
know? Yeah.
Adding the subs, because we've talked that will make the speakers basically take some of the load off your top speakers. Will you be able to get louder having just even adding one sub to your two tops?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In both ways, because if we look at a A-weighted loudness, our tops are going to be able to get louder because they're not going to run out as fast, not going to run out of gas as fast. They're not
Hmm.
trying to produce those low frequencies, which take a lot of movement, long wavelengths, take a lot of driver movement, use a lot of energy. So the top is definitely going to be able to get louder. And also, we're going to add a lot more low frequency energy that we weren't able to even produce before. Like you said, that might go down to 35, but not very well, right? Well, a
Hmm.
sub is going to do a much better job. So if we look at a C weighted measurement, we're going to definitely get more bottom end too.
Nice. Okay, so we talked crossover points a little bit. What's next that a person should kind of know or be thinking about when they're looking to add subs?
Well, I think we've covered all the acoustic things. I think we've covered all the characteristics for, the nuts and bolts of crossover, that sort of thing. I
Hmm.
think that, maybe one consideration is what size sub you should get. And I think that correlates with your tops. I like to have a sub slightly bigger than my top. So, if you have a 12-inch top, go with a 15 or an 18. I really like a 12 over 18. I really like that combination. But again, you're like, well, 18's too big and too heavy. Great, get the 15.
Hmm.
There's no perfect answer here. So, I don't typically like to match my sub size to my top. Like, we just had the example of the 12 over the 12.
Yep.
Again, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's wrong at all. But typically, if I was going with a 12-inch sub, it would be because I have an 8-inch top or a 10-inch top.
Hmm.
And kind of my magic pairings in a perfect world where engineering always ends in zero, which it never does, by the
Yeah,
way.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Is, I would say like, an 8 over a 12, a 10 over a 15, and a 12 over an 18. That's kind of my, all the, you know, stars line up in the sky and the angels sing, and that's just the perfect pairing. But, it doesn't mean that's the only pairing. 12 over 15 sounds great.
Hmm.
10 over 15 sounds great. 10 over 18 sounds great. I mean, just you want to kind of match things up though, right?
Right.
And if anything, most times the sub is going to struggle to keep up with the top no matter what.
Hmm.
So, if you have, let's say, a tier two top, don't get a tier one sub, get at least a tier two sub or a tier three sub, right?
Yeah.
And again, we talked a little bit. Well, I sort of very briefly mentioned like the Fletcher-Munson curve, which has now been updated to the equal loudness curve. But basically, we don't hear low frequencies very well, so those have to be louder to well, or the louder they get, the better we hear them. Is a better way of saying that.
Sure.
So that's where you're like, yeah, I need more firepower here. But then of course the other considerations are how you're going to get it there. Weight, space, transportation. Can you carry it? Can you get it on a cart? Does it have wheels? Do you play a lot of venues where you have to go up 3 flights of stairs? Well, I mean, So, and then of course cost.
Yeah, it costs depending upon which level you're talking. There's a noticeable difference, but you're also paying for additional features, additional beefiness in many of those subwoofers.
Oh, yeah. It's just, there's a lot of difference in the way it's manufactured, what it's manufactured out of. There's a lot of variation there, and you almost always get what you pay for. There's a reason, that something costs more than something else. And at the same time, it doesn't mean everybody should go buy the most expensive thing, because it's probably not going to have a return on investment, right?
That's obviously a big part of it, is that depending upon how many shows you're doing and how often you're going to need it, if you need it for 2 shows a year, you're going to take a long time to recoup that investment.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to jinx myself for this weekend, but I've got a large outdoor national act, Saturday night, and then I've got a large national act indoors in an arena Sunday. The truck is rolling overnight. I don't have time for something that blows up. And again, oh my gosh, I hope I don't jinx myself here, but but I'm just saying, like, it has to work Saturday night and it has to work Sunday.
Yeah.
The end. It just has to. So.
Yeah, and it's in some situations, like I've got a smaller little system that goes out a couple of times a year, and if I had to and a sub didn't work for some reason, well, I still had the two top speakers, and it wouldn't be the end of the day. In your line of work, if your subs didn't work for the night, you would have problems.
Yeah, and you're talking to a guy who started out with lights made out of coffee cans, so I certainly can appreciate being on a budget. I literally had to make the choice of whether I bought food or gear. That was a literal thing. And so I try to really recognize that. But I had a conversation with a guy who was talking about, and he used the word critical. And of course, some of our customers are in critical industries. Aerospace and the military and healthcare are some of the markets that we also serve, And anyway, he was talking about how critical his microphone was, and he had an off-brand, like $200 microphone, wireless microphone. And I just didn't even know what to say. I'm like, it doesn't sound very critical to me. It doesn't sound like you've prioritized that as a critical element.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so I've got mission critical. My gear and my speakers are this is. And oh, by the way, I'm using tinfoil to run the electricity from the wall to my gear.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. And I think that, there are places you make those decisions, right? You're like, well, this is critical, so it needs to have money put towards it, and this is not. So, I can save money here, whatever. We all make those decisions every day, right? On everything that we do. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I struggled hard with how I was going to reply to that, but I think that's just sort of a way to share with everybody to kind of think about it in that sense, right? Like, what does it cost you if it fails? Is it really critical? I think it's the same thing, when I go to trade shows and, DJs will go out to a club and spend $2,000 on bottle service, and then the next day can't really justify spending money on gear. And I'm like, that's fascinating to me. You flew here to an industry show. You're going to own this piece of gear for years. And you're like, I don't know if I could spend $1,000 on that, But you spent $2,000 on booze the night before. And I'm like, I think you just have to do some ROI calculations in your mind, right? How critical is it and what does it matter, right? And what kind of money should be put towards it. And I think if we, let's just do like a basic cost benefit analysis. But if you say, what do you suppose the average wedding DJ does a year? 20 shows,
Yeah, about,
26?
let's say 20 weddings a year.
So if you have a piece of gear for 5 years, and you do 20 shows a year, that's 100 shows.
Mm-hmm.
So if it costs you $1,000, then it basically costs you $10 a show. And that's assuming that you don't sell it used to anybody and recover. Let's just assume it's zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, all right, we got to just do a little analysis here.
Yep.
What's this worth to me? And then I think the question is, if the difference was $2 a show, let's say you spent $800 versus $1,000, and the difference was $2 a show, but it fails. How important is that $2? How important is that $2, right? Because that's the reality that we're talking about. But I think amortization is a difficult thing to comprehend. I think it's a difficult thing for some people to sort of think about. Yeah, it's the money I'm spending now, but it's a 5-year game plan.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's not really my typical show. I'm not a finance guy, but I can tell you that is the secret to making a lot of money in the end, is buying good gear and running it for a lot of shows.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, when you can get that price per down like that, because it has been a piece that would last a long time. A couple of other areas with subwoofers. We've done shows. I put a link in the description below where we talked about subwoofer placement, so you guys can go check that out, because that was kind of an interesting show about can I get it louder by doing this, that, or the other thing. I still like that part in the video, Ben, where you put the sub on your head and we were dancing in circles to see if that gave it more bass. It didn't.
Yeah, comment below when you see that part.
Yeah, you see that part. Yeah, make sure you let us know. But yeah, so there's a lot of great stuff. Go out to the YouTube channel and search subwoofers, and there's some videos that we've done on that topic if you want to get more advanced in placement and how many to use and how to set them all up and such. Yeah, just a lot of information.
And still one of my favorite shows, I think, because I think it's an aha moment for a lot of people, but it's also probably an infuriating moment for a lot of people, which is good, right? But was our show, can you get 1,000 watts from 100 watts?
Mm-hmm.
So viewers, go give that a look. And here's the deal: it's not as controversial as it seems, maybe, because it's just physics. But I want you guys to know these things.
And that link, I just put that one down in the comment section also.
That was a fun one, I thought, because it explains how a lot of these things just don't make sense. And people are like, well, if I've got this size generator, but my speaker's this many watts, or, why does this happen, or why does that happen? There's a lot going on under the hood, so. Yeah,
definitely you guys can check those out. Up next, Jay and Brian are back tonight for the Tuesday Night Music Show at 10 o'clock Eastern, so in about 25 minutes, give or take, out at djntv.com/chill. You guys can go check that out. And if you're happen to be at the Marquee Show, or you're going to be checking that out, I think I saw Kyle's there.
Kyle's there. Kat's there.
Nice.
So, go say hi to them for me, please.
Yeah, go say hi. And I've heard they've got some good deals there that they're repping there at the show. So definitely check those out if you're in the area.
They must be, because Kat won't tell me what they are.
That whole loose lips sync shit.
Yeah.
Is that what it?
She's like, don't worry about it. It's none of your business.
Yeah,
like,
we got this covered. You just do your thing there, boss.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, gang, have yourself a wonderful evening. We're going to be off for a couple of weeks because we've got next week is 4th of July week, and we're going to hopefully get ready to blow things up, because that's the American way.
Not speakers, though.
Not speakers. No, not gear. We're going to go blow some other things up.
We end a run. I don't know why anybody would care to hear this, but anyway, I'm just sharing with all my closest friends here. But we end a run of shows on July 7th, and I've actually coordinated with that venue to have a large Blackstone griddle brought to me. So the next morning, because we don't have anywhere that we have to be that day, I'm going to cook pancakes for the whole crew. So
I want to see pictures of this, by the way. Ben cooking a big Blackstone full of pancakes. That should be pretty
I'll
awesome.
do it, man. Pancakes and sausage, and it's I don't know, it's like 12 people or whatever. So whatever, be a lot of fun. So
yeah, good stuff. Well, gang, again, djntv.com/chill. Go out and check that out in about 25 minutes. It's a Zoom meeting. You can go in there and hang out and talk and share some music ideas. I'll have a good time with that. And we'll catch you next time. Good night, everybody.